Can I ask you, first up, let's talk about this new report that has come out, well, a leaked classified document that's come out from the American government that suggests that from early assessments, with low confidence, admittedly, leaked to the American media, that those bunker buster bombs, that incredibly audacious bombing of the Iranian nuclear sites, didn't obliterate the nuclear program for Iran and may have only set it back not just by years, but only by months. Is that true or not?
Julia, don't be a silly girl. I'm not going to comment on reports of classified documents.
Well, Donald Trump has. Donald Trump's report.
And he's my boss, okay? If it were true, which I'm not going to qualify, then Iran wouldn't have agreed to the ceasefire. So just use common sense, please, my dear.
OK, you're saying Donald Trump has arrived at the NATO summit and he's argued that, yeah, the reason why we've got a ceasefire, which does appear now to be holding between Iran and Israel, is because their nuclear capability was wiped out. But we also have reports, including from the IEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, that there's concern that the enriched uranium was actually removed from sites like Fordo before the airstrikes and is now somewhere in Iran.
And there were reports that President Trump wouldn't win the election in 2016. There were reports that he wouldn't win the election in 2024. So I'll stick with the guy who actually wins every time. Thank you, Julia. And that man is Donald J. Trump, the incumbent president.
Well, he doesn't win every time. Didn't win in 2020, did he?
Yes, he did.
Oh, there we are. We're back to that. What did you make of his language yesterday? I'm going to play a brief clip for those people who've been under a stone, maybe under Fordo Mountain in Iran over the last 24 hours. This is what President Trump said about the, well, what it looked like was breaking of that Iran-Israel ceasefire yesterday. Here's what he had to say.
You know what? We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the they're doing. Do you understand that?
You want to reply in Iraq?
That's what he had to say. What do you make of his language, Seb?
I love it. As a friend of mine on his show commented yesterday, he said, that's why 77 million Americans voted for Donald Trump, because he lives in the real world. He says it as it is, unvarnished, and God bless him.
OK. He's been very unvarnished in his conversations with NATO fellow members. And I have to say, I think we discussed it way back when, after 2016, his first term in office, it was very clear that he didn't see why American taxpayers should fund all the defence umbrella for European countries when they didn't pay their minimum requirement of 2% of GDP towards their defence capabilities. I was with him all the way, defended him on that publicly. He's been saying it again. We've now seen in the NATO Secretary General, Mark Rutte, being able to help push everybody up, I think apart from Spain, to a commitment to 5% of GDP by 2035. Is that going to be enough? And is a lot of those commitments, are they actually worth the paper they're printed on? Because a lot of it is like, you know, we'll pay Mauritius a big sum to give away the Diego Garcia base. We'll claim that's part of our defence spending. Are you still concerned that Donald Trump's plain speaking on this issue is not matched by real money from Europeans?
Well, the trend line was incredibly good, completely positive in the first Trump administration. When we arrived, less than a third of NATO members actually stuck to the 2% GDP target force goals. By the end of our first administration, that number had risen to almost 70%, and it was real expenses on real capabilities that make the alliance safer collectively. So we want that trend line to continue. And, you know, I don't want to pick on individual countries.
Go on. You know you want to.
Lithuania is a champion. You look at the Baltic states, look at those nations who've actually suffered under the boot of jackbooted communism, and they committed to 5%. I think the first week we were here in the White House, you know, when there are nations that understand that this is about being serious, the president recognizes them, and as such, we believe the alliance is stronger than it has ever been. So make it real, make it relevant to all of NATO capabilities. But what we have achieved in just, think about this, we are 158 days in. It is incredible what President Trump has done in less than 6 months' time. OK. Oh, look, you're saying it's stronger than it's ever been. There's no doubt at all. You've got countries like Poland, the Baltic states, including Lithuania, they've upped their spending. Germany has finally woken up to the Russian threat. Do you think that what Britain is doing is enough? Yeah, I love coming on British shows, but as a, politically commissioned officer of the president in the National Security Council, I'm not going to target out individual countries just because the host doesn't like the color of the government you have in 10 Downing Street. So,
I'll criticise any government. Don't worry, I'm an equal opportunity critic.
We want all NATO nations to act like serious allies. That applies to every government, every prime minister, and every president.
You say NATO is stronger than ever, and yet Donald Trump kind of put the wind up an awful lot of European leaders, not only with his urging restraint from Ukraine and Zelensky, whilst apparently thinking that somehow Putin is the victim in the Ukraine war, but also saying yes.
Julia, I'm not gonna let you get away with that. That's garbage. That's utter rubbish.
Which
garbage,
bit?
Rubbish.
Which bit?
Rubbish. Okay. The president has never ever said that Putin is the victim. Stop it, Julia. You need to get over
in the White House, when he was attacking Zelensky, he actually talked about Putin having to put up with these outrageous claims about him. He made him the victim.
I'm not letting you get away with it.
He is the aggressor. Okay, I'm going to come back to Russia, but I want to ask you about comments that Donald Trump made about how there are different interpretations of Article 5 in the NATO treaty, which most people, including me, would say is the attack on one is attack on all, pointing out, and in fact we had a former British Defence Secretary on earlier pointing out the exact wording doesn't say you have to come to the aid of a country, you have to consider what you could do in terms of helping a fellow country. Can you tell us right now, as a senior aide to President, that if there were an attack on Lithuania, that you've just mentioned, the Baltic states, that America would come to the military aid of that country?
I think it's better that your viewers and your listeners actually do their own homework, because the NATO alliance was created with the shortest ever treaty in modern history. I cut my teeth on NATO issues back in the 1990s, and it's just 14 paragraphs long. It's the shortest treaty of its kind. And if you read Article 5, it is very clear what Article 5 says. It has been misrepresented for 60 plus years, but it says all NATO nations are required to respond to an attack on one of those NATO nations. However, Julia, and this is what the president's talking about, it doesn't say how they are required to respond. That's the rub. It is a community of people who share values. It is the pinnacle of Western civilization's military capabilities. But at the end of the day, it's not something that forces you to nuke a country if one soldier has put boots on your territory. I recommend every single viewer and listener read Article.
Okay. I don't think we were talking about nuking, but I think we know the playbook from Russia in Crimea and then in the Donbass region of Ukraine, that it doesn't start with tanks rolling over the territory in a very clear attack. It does start with, they were called the little green men, weren't they? Men who not even in uniform, but with steel cap boots, walking into a territory. That is what is likely if it could happen, if it does happen in the Baltic states. Would America militarily defend the Baltic states?
America will do whatever is required in the interests of our country. That's what America means.
Not as NATO, then.
Julia, you've got to stop it, okay? You're constantly trying to undermine the most successful president of the modern age.
I'm not. That's certainly not true. I've been full of. Seb, I know you follow me on social media. I have been full of praise for Donald Trump, what he's done in Iran. I don't undermine him at all.
You have to salt our interviews with these silly little infidels.
With facts and questions.
What fact? What fact are you? The current hypothetical cannot be deemed a fact. You're asking me a hypothetical.
I'm asking you, would he intervene?
That's not a fact. It's a hypothetical.
You said I was undermining him by asking a question.
Fact and hypothetical.
All right. If you're not going to answer that, let's talk about Israel and Iran. Again, fully support Donald Trump's action on that. I think he absolutely gets the significance of Israel as the only democratic state in the Middle East, as fighting a civilizational battle against the mad mullahs, the Islamic fundamentalists in Iran, Hamas, Hezbollah and elsewhere. And I love that Donald Trump gets that in a way that it would appear the Democrats no longer do. What I don't understand is why he doesn't understand that Ukraine is in exactly the same predicament in their battle with Russia. Why does he view Israel and Ukraine so differently?
I really don't. I love how you think you know how President Trump thinks.
I'm going based on what he's saying.
Why on earth has he invited the Premier of Ukraine to the Oval Office? Why? Because he doesn't think it's a problem, Julia?
I didn't. Well, he did invite him if he wanted to do a deal on minerals.
No. Julia. It wasn't about minerals. It was about tying our two nations together to guarantee that no country would invade.
There's a country invading them right now.
Julia, you're obsessed with pieces of paper that mean nothing, just like...
No, I'm not. No, I don't think pieces of paper count at all. Action is what counts. Which is why I love what Donald Trump did for Israel against Iran.
I will explain to you once more what the meeting in the Oval was about. Much more important than any specious piece of paper that provides...
Not talking about pieces of paper.
Stop, Julia. You're interrupting me. Let me finish. It's about making sure that no nation dares invade Ukraine again. Which, by the way, can we just do a little bit of an overview? Why was it that Putin refused to invade anywhere when we were in the White House the first time? Why is that? Why was it that Ukraine was only invaded under the watch of George W. Bush when it came to South Ossetia and Georgia, and then Ukraine under Obama, and then Ukraine a second time under Biden? You seem to miss these things.
Okay, well, what did Donald Trump do in 2016 when Crimea had already been seized by Russia? I don't remember you doing very much.
What did we do? I'll tell you what we did. Instead of sending them blankets like Obama did, we sent them the most effective anti-tank weapon possible, the man-portable Javelin missile. That's what we did.
So you thought that Ukraine had the right to self-defense and should oust Russia. This is the thing. You're talking about pieces of paper. I've not mentioned pieces of paper. We're talking about action. I ask you, why does Donald Trump view Ukraine in its relationship with the Russian invaders any differently to Israel and what they're dealing with Iran? Why does he understand Israel's predicament and the need, civilizationally, morally, militarily, in every other way, the need to take Iran on? Why does Donald Trump not appear, from what he says himself and his own actions, I'm not reading his mind, I haven't got a crystal ball, from what he said and what he does himself, that he doesn't see Ukraine as being in the same position that Israel is with Iran, where Ukraine is with Russia?
So your interpretation is patently wrong. The similarities between both of those cases are obvious. Why? Because President Trump is expending all of his international capital to make two things happen. Peace to be established on the Eurasian landmass between Russia and Ukraine, and peace finally to break out in the Middle East after 46 years of an Islamo-fascist regime being a threat to all of us. It is exactly the same. The fact that you missed that analog is really quite...
But peace in Ukraine would be at the price of giving away 20% of Ukrainian territory to its invading
you have no knowledge of that. You have no idea what's
That's what Steve Witkoff was talking about.
You have no...
That's what Steve Witkoff has talked about in public interviews. I'm not making it up. He's been on American television talking about the Donbass region and talking about Crimea.
I know Steve Witkoff. I bump into him regularly in the West Wing. I guarantee you.
It's not a figment of my imagination. You're not asking Israel to give up territory to make peace with Iran. You use force to force Iran to make peace, to cease, a ceasefire at least, but not taking the same tack with Russia.
You're being hectoring now. You're hectoring.
No, I'm asking you a question.
You're hectoring.
Oh, come on, you're a grown-up man. Don't be silly.
No, you're hectoring.
Why do you not see the difference?
There is a massive difference, and the fact is, Steve Witkoff, I guarantee you, has never said we are giving up on that territory. Don't be a fake news purveyor.
I didn't say he said that they were going to give up, but that's what the negotiations are about.
You don't know that. You don't know that. You're not in the room, Julia. I'm sorry. I know you've got FOMO, but you're not in the room.
Oh, look, our time is up. We're again. I mean, Sebastian, it's always good getting you on. I don't know what we learned from that, I have to say, but I'm a little bit more worried for Ukraine and Lithuania.
That's what you learned.
Oh, it's always good to get you on. Sebastian Gorka, Deputy Assistant to President Trump, Senior Director for Counter-Terrorism.